Yes.
performing arts. And could you please tell me about your background, your family background, and education background as well?
I was born in Kawempe. Kawempe is on the other side when you're going north of Uganda. Bombo Road is where I was born. And I was born when Museveni's war was ending. My background, my dad was an electrician. My mom was a civil worker in the transport bus company that used to exist. It was called UTC. And through that humble upbringing, they were able to insist on all of us going to school. And I went to Shira College Boutique, one of the schools I share with that gentleman over there. Shira College Boutique obeys in the place. Oh yeah, we are two of us. So is it Mulondo House or Nile House? Mulondo House. That's the best house. These other houses don't really exist. Yeah. So I went to Shira College Boutique, and because of my beliefs and who I was becoming as a man, I decided to switch so many schools because they were not suiting what I was seeking out of life. And through that transformation, which most African parents mistake for Omwana Dalu is being stubborn, it's because parents and students and their children don't have a miscommunication of other people trying to discover and become themselves. And the parents are still trying to insist on a world that they think should be the world for their children, and usually people conflict. So from Shira College Boutique, I attended about 8 schools from a gap of 2 years before I ended up at university. And at university, I was doing environmental management. Throughout that whole journey, I haven't mentioned any music class. But my education and introduction to music was through storytelling. I became passionate about books. I became passionate about people who were performing on TV, and I wanted to understand every word which was behind every lyric, because to me the words themselves have sounds. When a person says bowling, or imagine bowling, or what would that be like? Is that a bird flying in the air? Is that a round-headed person? What's that? So every word has a sound to it. So in discovering what hip-hop music is or was, I discovered a love for music. Until I was at university, that's where I discovered the beauty in lyrics, the beauty in sounds, the beauty in being an artist, which is the greatest thing you can ever become in the whole world. Now, normally in my nature, I'm a quiet person. Most people don't believe this, but when I'm not being GNL, I'm a very quiet person, reserved. If I were not be speaking here, I'd probably be like those gentlemen in the back, just observing. But when the music takes you over, it's a freeing agent, right? I discovered myself landing on stage and singing these lyrics, and the journey has always been like that for me. I discovered that I could do so many things as GNL, because for me GNL is like my alter ego. Through GNL, through that greatness of no limit, I can conquer anything in front of me. So the limelight, I've stumbled upon things that have led me to the limelight almost by accident. I was sharing a story with Mr. Isabirie that when I went for the project that made me known for the very first time, it was because I had gone to film other rappers. I wasn't a rapper by then, but I'd gone to film other people, and by accident, still, I was asked to audition. And when I auditioned, it was one of the best verses they said they had ever had on the project by then, and I became part of the hip-hop canvas. That was in 2005. It was the very, very first time I ever recorded a verse and put it on. In hip-hop, we call it putting it on wax. So I put something on wax, and that ended up being the project that expanded my networks, that put me in touch with other peers who are creators, and I never looked back since then. In hip-hop we have 5 elements, and in those 5 elements, all of the things that I'm mentioning are all part of that. So in hip-hop music, you have the rapping, you have the DJing, you have breakdancing, and then you have art, which is painting, the visual art, and then you have the 5th, which is seeking knowledge and sharing the knowledge. Do any of you know Maslow? Have you ever heard of Maslow? So Maslow has this pyramid, and in the pyramid he was talking about the needs that a society has. And through those needs of a society, at the top of that pyramid, he placed self-actualization. And self-actualization is where you get to where you've been seeking for all of this knowledge, and how does it make you become a higher version of yourself. So in hip-hop, all of those 5 things combined together define also the toolboxes and the things that I can do. And through storytelling, you can tell a story when you've just painted a piece of art. You can tell a story through poetry. You can tell a story through the music. You can tell a story through dance. You can tell a story through film. So I do all of those. Art is observation. So if you're going to be a good artist and succeed at being an artist, the first thing you should be is an observant person. And through observation, there are so many things that you're going to stumble upon. When you observe, you learn from others. When you observe, you examine yourself. You get me? Observation is very key. When you observe, you become a fan of something. Whether it's a cloth, you can give it life. So observation is very key. When we were having lunch today, a gentleman came to me, and he's part of this department. And he told me that he's a very brilliant actor, right? And I said, oh, we had a conversation, and he seemed like a very interesting person. So I asked him, he asked me, do you have a phone number that I can reach you on? Then I told him, I have about 1,000 people who ask for my phone number. But in order for me to give you my phone number, I need you to show me something. I told him, do you have any video that I can check out of you acting? He said no. I said, do you have YouTube? He said, I go to YouTube. I said, do you have Facebook? He said, I have Facebook. I said, do you have anything of your acting, your passion, the thing that you want to pursue? Do you have any of these on your Facebook page? He said, no. Then I asked him, do you have WhatsApp? He said, yes. I asked, do you have videos that you share with your friends that I can see? He said he didn't have any of them. And I asked him, because I didn't want to be unfair to him, I asked him, does your phone have a camera? And he was holding it in his hand. And indeed, it had a camera. Then I told him, you're not ready to have my number. You get? Because everyone tells me they are great actors, they are great musicians, but there's nothing to see. So I cannot believe you among other people who are ready. Do you have something I can see? They have a portfolio to show you. Even if it isn't classy, even if it's the worst sound or whatever, but I can refer to that and show somebody else that this person is an actor. I told him, you're not observing the space around you, because the space around you, everybody has a phone that they are moving. It's in front of them that guides their whole lives. So you're telling me that you are preparing for this special life, and you have all the tools. You're even luckier that you have a phone with a camera, but you have nothing to show me of the art that you want to take seriously to even feed your family. You have nothing to show me. I told him, you don't have my number. That means he failed to be an artist that observes that the market that he is going to be operating in, everybody has a phone, and on that phone, it's your CV, it's your portfolio. You don't need to show me your CV. I don't know where you're studying. I don't need to know that. Just show me what you can do, what you have learned, what you're practicing, what's going to make you a better artist. And he wasn't ready.
Thank you so much.
How can you tell a past to make sure that this music is developed right away from primary schools? The nature of primary schools is what in Uganda, you know, that this music is not examined in primary schools. So how can you as artists tell a past to develop it?
Yeah, okay, I'm going to stand up because I want to add something as I'm answering your question. I think the very first thing that we need to do is change attitudes. Now I'm going to draw something on the board and I'm going to ask you a question and I want an answer from you guys. Could I have some talk? Before we get to primary school, before we get to classrooms and what we can do over there, I need to first ask the class, which is a music class, which is in Africa, right? Who can tell me what these two symbols stand for?
The first symbol is for Rastafarians, Ethiopians.
It's for Rastafarians and Ethiopians, okay? Any other people trying? So, before we get back to primary school, we as Africans need to first educate ourselves on who we are. Because once we begin changing that, and recognizing who we are as a people, that problem is easily solved because the minister will be the first person to advocate for music, our music, traditional music, to be taught in school, in primary school. Before they even get to primary school, these two symbols should be known in every African home. But in Africa, in Uganda, most people know this symbol. That's called a what? But they don't know that the cross was adopted from this, the Ethiopian one. He calls it the Ethiopian one because it's the earliest symbol that shows, this is the symbol of life, it's called the ankh. If we don't have this knowledge of ourselves, we here in this class, we have grown, we are in our 30s, we're in our 40s, some are getting to their 20s, but we don't know that this symbol represents us more than this symbol does. And that this symbol was adopted from this symbol. And that this symbol is older than this symbol. Because this symbol was a symbol of crucifixion. It's a Roman punishment, right? But this is the symbol of life. That shows how a baby is created, the male part and the female part. If we don't have the knowledge of who we are as Africans, we are always going to beg the systems of the white people to tell us who we are. And we are always going to try to imitate their ways of teaching instead of identifying what our systems are. We are at a university where you'll find that we do not create from this energy. We do not create from who we are as a people, but you're trying to create to be like Mariah Carey. When you have this, your children do not know who they are because every morning you're trying to tell them to be more Western instead of being more African. But you've been drumming the message of this instead of this message here and retracing who you are. Most people will tell you the history of Uganda begins when 1962. Because 1962. That means you're defining yourselves by a system that was brought over here. That your importance is only validated because someone else came over here. But to answer your problem of how the artists can help re-educate or unlearn some things that we've already learned is for the artists themselves to read the books they're meant to read. To have the proper education, because artists and music is the very first form of education. Before they get to primary school, what lullaby does the mother sing to their children? Are they singing Baby Jesus? Or are they singing something which is traditional? Is it from Munyoro? Is it from Acholi? What does that child hear in her ears or his ears before they go to bed? By the time you get to primary level, there's no need to teach that child anything because they already know from their primary source, from Jaja, from auntie, from uncle, and they're telling them stories of their ancestry. You get me? So we as artists, our role is to retrace who we are as Africans, define ourselves by our systems so that we can create better for our people. There's a disconnect between us being Africans and our education system. We are setting ourselves up to fail. And as musicians, because we learn everything through music, for you to learn the alphabet, you sang it. A, B, C, D, E, F, G became a song. We need to get back to first knowing who we are as Africans before we can begin teaching anything new. Otherwise, everything else is an exercise in futility if we don't know that this represents the galaxy, the stars in the sky. Because your ancestors at some point knew exactly where they were placed according to sun movements and moon movements. But you will not know that knowledge because there's a disconnect between you talking to your grandparents and how your grandparents also began valuing white people's systems because they had the resources to pay the policemen. So, to answer your question, I know it became a long lecture, but that's part of the whole problem of the system, is we are trying to be white people. We're trying to be Western. We're trying to have a Western mindset, erasing everything that makes us African, to have value in what we are doing and teach value to our children. Yes, sir.
Apart from Baruch and the Abataka, who are the founders of Lugaflow in Uganda?
Yes. The founders of Lugaflow, thank you, that's a very good question. The founders of Lugaflow cannot be GNL Zamba, they cannot be Babalu. The founders of Lugaflow are the same people that invented language. All we did was to remind a generation that only wanted to rap in English like Americans, that we as Africans have very beautiful languages when we speak them. All we did is reinvigorate Lugaflow. Luga not meaning Uganda. Luga is a Swahili word that means languages, indigenous languages. Everybody else was trying to be Tupac, everybody was trying to be Nas. But in order for me to be GNL, in order for Babaluku to be Babaluku, to make Bataka clan, and for GNL of Focus Zamba, we had to adopt an African nature, an African approach. And the results show, because the hip-hop that wasn't making any money, the moment we began rapping in Uganda, we made our first million, we made our first 2 million, 3 million, endorsements of 100 million. But before there was a disconnect. You'll see that the people relate more when you rap in Uganda than when you're rapping in English. So in order, Lugaflow was invented on a fireplace. Africans where they used to sing to each other around the fire. That's why Lugaflow was created. That's why the earliest version of hip-hop is created. Because like I told you, you have graffiti. They began drawing in caves, telling stories in caves, before anything was ever recorded. That's the earliest form of storytelling, graffiti. People still paint on walls in Kampala to tell stories of whatever is going on. That's hip-hop right there, storytelling. They'll tell you about the dancing and break dancing, Mazina, right? People used to dance around the fire. So what we are doing is not only a thing of, we're just doing it to make money, but this is a thing that defines us and identifies us as a people. And the money will always come as long as you get this right. If you don't get this right, music if you don't have these basics. What take hip-hop music, if you really, really understand hip-hop music, you'll understand that it has a knowledge bit of it, it has a spiritual bit of it. You can be spiritual through hip-hop, you can worship God through hip-hop. You can do anything through hip-hop, you can teach through hip-hop. It's an approach to everything. You can do everything through hip-hop music. And hip-hop music, let's take an example. You guys all write songs, right? you compose lyrics and all these other things. So, banzalira mu ghetto awatali mutto GNL Zamba n'ingoma ya Yesu Kristo. GNL zije nababana tebambalanga tenkuba bwetonnya okuvayo obeera weetaaga lyato. Okubeera waneno namwenze kyali kirooto nawandikanga rhymes zange mwana kutadooba. Awo mbeera mazeyo oluyimba lwa airwaves. Tubadde luweddeeyo from top to bottom. That's it. But to me, that's an introduction. Just an introduction to my story. And I've already told you too much about myself in one song. And that's the song which everybody related to because what Banj by Bavamo Ghetto. Babu Kamiala. I come from Kawempe. You get me? I told you my story in my very first song that you got to love me too. I told you my whole story. I didn't tell a lie. The power of hip-hop music is that we tell real life stories. There's a disconnect if you're only telling things that aren't real. You don't get to at a certain point, about 5-10 years, and your career is no more. Or your shelf value is no longer being valued. But if you sing real things that people can relate to, and that's what hip-hop allows. Hip-hop is expression. My name, GNL Zamba, stands for Greatness of Knowledge. It comes from a philosophy that at the highest level of self-expression, if you're achieving your true self, you can achieve greatness of knowledge. And by self, let me define the self. Self, yebumunda. I want to do an exercise, right? I'm going to do an exercise. I want you to say mango, but wait. I want you to say mango. Don't say it out. Right? So I'm going to count up to 3, and I want you guys to say mango. Right? Are you ready?
Yes.
1, 2, 3.
Mango.
I said, don't voice it with your mouth. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. So let's try another one. Let's say fene. I don't want to hear it. Right? Count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Did you hear that word? Did you hear yourself speak it? Where would the money go, Chogire? But your mouth did not speak it. Did your mouth speak it? But you had yourself speak it, right? And your brain thought about it and spoke it. Now, that's self. That's you. The rest is a shell. Self is just spiritual. It's the spiritual part of you, the one that has not spoke that word that you had. Now, at the highest level of self-expression, you achieve greatness of knowledge. Self does not lie. You don't lie to yourself. At this point, through your art, through your music, through your career, if you're not lying to this person, this person, in fact, doesn't even value material. At the highest level of expressing this person that spoke that thing without you voicing it, you achieve greatness of knowledge. And it's the same philosophy if you want to reach the highest version of yourself. But Mandela it's service to self. It's not because they have the biggest houses in Africa, it's not because they drive the biggest cars, but it's because their selves was given to the service of the communities they exist in. They are the greatest men that have ever walked this generation. So true greatness lies in self, expression of self. And that's what hip-hop music does for me, to answer the question.
According to some people in the communities that they are trying to actually promote morality, what do you say about that, and how could we kill such attitudes that are trying to drive the communities to get the real message which music is trying to pass?
Yes.
Because through music, there's a lot of message passed, right from the church, even in the communities.
Your first question is about perception and why the music no longer has a message, right? Is that, if I'm getting you right? Okay. Perception. The reason why I told you I went to so many schools within a gap of 2 years. I told you specifically I went to Chirakwet Boutique for 4 years. And I was fine during that time, but after that time, between my O-level and my A-level, I went to 8 schools. You know why? Because through the music, I discovered who I was, my true self. I discovered that. Now, with discovering that true self, I began growing my hair. You get me? I have dreadlocks now. You get me? Like Solomon had dreadlocks, I have dreadlocks too. And I'm answering your question of perception. And it's all going to tie into this at the end of the day. In perception, every time I plaited my hair, there were men that used to tell my father, your son is becoming a homosexual. He's plaiting his hair. What kind of man plaits his hair? My dad would keep quiet. One time I was sitting for my last paper, Makerere University, Environmental Law. The lecturer came from behind me and began hitting me with a pen in the head. Binobichi, told me to get out. We had some kind of exchange going on. But by then, but at the end of the day, I sat for my paper because I managed to appeal to the people at Makerere University to listen to me for just 30 minutes to explain my side of the story. And this was my side of the story. African men, our hair grows down, right? It's kinky. It's naturally kinky. But the perception of a man who is responsible lies in our history and in our colonialism. The people who were telling my father things, right, did not understand or first even observe what's around them. That Maasai men, Karamojong men, all have braids. Is it true? Right now, if I wore a skirt and walked outside here, everybody would probably point at me and laugh. But the Maasai get a bed sheet, even the Somalis, and they walk outside. But because of the perception and colonization, by Lebanon, they were looking for men to fit in the army. And they told all Africans, because African hair is intimidating if it's out. If I begin moving my hair like this, it has power in it. It has strength, it's my identity. But the white people found that intimidating. So they told all the Africans who were joining the first army in Uganda, the first police unit, to shave their heads. They all shaved their heads. They all wore shorts. And they told them that no civil servant would get a job. Just like an official government if you have long hair. All of them shaved their heads. In order to study at a government school, all of you have to first shave off your head. All of them shaved their heads. So even right now, most people in Kampala do not look at another person with hair and a fellow African with hair and think that they are a responsible human being. So in order for us to first free ourselves, it's reality, that is right, that's right. In order for us to free ourselves, we need to first uncolonize our minds. Because omuntu ne bwayimira ku TV nga alina dreadlocks, olina yimira nga asibye essaati, right? Nga ayambadde egundi, a suit. Even if this one's speaking a lot of sense, they will take the other ones. It's a thing of perception. They will think the other man has more sense than this one. But it's because we are colonized in our minds. We haven't freed ourselves. That's perception, my brother. Your other question was about message. Why is the message lacking? So we as a society, most of the times, we are like journalists. If it bleeds, it leads. If I talk about the woman's buttocks, if I say all these good words, people are very, people gravitate to that easily. It's low-hanging fruit. But to create an inspirational song that's going to last forever, you need to first take your ego out of it. You, yourself, create music for a society. Put your ego out of it. And if you create from a point from this vibration of self, mulimunda, without the selfishness and the ego coming in, you create lasting music. But it's because most of the musicians themselves do not have a deep well of knowledge to draw from when they are creating. All their music is garbage. But if you have a deep well that you're drawing from and you know
who you are, it's very easy to create songs that connect with people. Because if you know who you are, it becomes a vibration where you're creating while connecting with other people on a similar vibration. Obera tolimba, it's easy to create with other people nga tolimba. They say God is truth, the truth and the light and all of those things. You discover all those two things when you are not lying to yourself. And if musicians begin creating from that angle of say limba, all the music will soon have a message. But because we are creating it from Mere ya Lero, you get me? All the music is garbage. All the music doesn't have sense.
Now, one of the sections I will pick from your background is that you managed to go up the university with your vision of pursuing that the bachelor's in environmental law. Then all of a sudden, I don't know by accident, you found yourself great career on that area.
Yeah.
How can you have come to the resources that you are done?
How can I account for it? That's a very good question. It's hilarious. It's hilarious, but that's a very good question. How can I account for my dad's school fees that he wasted in Makerere University? First of all, I have a confession. Even though I went through 8 schools to get to university, by the time I got there, I passed highly. I was doing PEM art, physics, economics, math, art. I passed highly. My dad did not think I was going to pass because he was also educated in the colonial system. You get me? That's what, and he's right. He had fear that his son would not succeed. So when I passed highly, even though my career used to study for free, I did not tell him that I had passed. So he told me to go get the forms for private education. And the whole entire time I was in Makerere, his school fees for me was my pocket money. On my very first concert, I had 12,000 people. I shut down. It was unprecedented. They had never seen it. But because education education does not lie. I'm not against education. I'm against the form on which we receive the education. By the time I marketed my concert, I knew I needed a manager, I needed all these production people. It's because I was an educated musician. So by the time I got to filling this stadium, I knew exactly how the money was going to be made. I knew exactly how to brand myself and present myself in front of the people that had the money to finance my project. My dad was paid on this very first concert. And his payment was not only monetary. He did not ask me for money. But on that very day, he apologized to me for ever having doubted me. So, defining hip-hop, what is hip-hop? You first need to understand the hip, and then understand the hop. To be hip is to know. That's why the way of money, you know. To hop is a movement. So hip-hop is intelligent movement. But most people ignore the hip because they don't educate themselves on what they're meant to know. The knowledge of self, the knowledge of your community, your identity as Africans. Hip-hop, everybody has their own definition. You define it for yourself because you have the knowledge of self. So it's, to be hip is to know your surroundings, you've observed them as easy. And then movement, kutambu, it's going somewhere. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to meet all of you. Even though I don't know your names right now, but I feel we have shared something special in this space, to be able to speak to other artists, to be able to speak to other creatives about our challenges and things that we need to create better. I hope that through this conversation we have both learned something. I need to first thank the doctor Thank you, Saisali, as well. Plus, yes, the two doctors in the building.
I had the occasion to travel together with GNL. In 2009, we were actually going to Addis Ababa. And that is the first time we actually met. We met in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. We had gone on the same event. We were invited by Selam for a festival. And GNL, maybe I should even say this at this point. Having changed, you were asked about those other guys. I need to help you put this record straight. Yes, whatever. This man you see here, and I qualify to call him this man, he is so kind that he can allow me to do this. Is the guy who helped us to start hip-hop in our languages in this country. He is the one. This one. In 2005 is when we now started to see hip-hop in Uganda, Indigenous. Actually, it was Luganda for a long time. Luganda. And some people thought that Lugaflow means Luganda hip-hop. Isn't it? Then, there was a project where other languages were more pronounced. And that happened in 2010. Okay? So, there was a hip-hop campus in 2010 where actually hip-hop, rap was there, Kinyankole, even Rusoga, and so forth, came on board. And now hip-hop is all over Uganda. But the top, the beginning point,